Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse from Lunar Astrology, and in this recording I'm going to be looking at the astrology of May 2022. So as we come into May, the first thing is that we are still in eclipse season. So it's a very karmic period of time. There's a lot of karmic lessons that are becoming clear around this time. And we are also in the shadow of the upcoming Mercury retrograde. Mercury went into the shadow around April 26. So that just tells us that the thoughts, ideas, conversations that are happening around this time, we're likely to revisit those. We're going to go back over this ground again. On the 2nd of May, Venus is going to move into Aries. Now, Venus is said to be in detriment in Aries. And the word detriment does have a few negative connotations. I personally have my natal Venus in Aries. So I do like to look at how she can work best in this sign. The reason that Venus is said to be in detriment is because she naturally rules the opposite sign of Libra. Venus is all about love and coming from the heart and relating and relationships. But Aries is a sign that is much more about independence. So this is why there is a little bit of a discrepancy between these energies. Venus wants to relate, but Aries wants to be on its own. But it is a perfect meld of influences to really bring up the conversation about self-love, self-Aries, love Venus. So during this transit, the best way that we can use these energies is by the practice of self-love. Generally speaking, when Venus is in Aries, some of the complications are that we can become impatient around our relationships. We can become impatient about money. We can be a bit more impulsive about those things. And Venus tends to see a lot of things that she likes. All of a sudden, it's very inspiring and very interesting. And, oh, that person's nice. And she starts the chase towards the person or the object or the job or the idea. And it's all very thrilling. But she can then run out of energy really quickly because she kind of uses it all up on this initial excitement and then kind of burns herself out. So the thrill of the chase is a very Venus in Aries kind of quality, but sometimes we don't always get what we want or we get bored before we get there. So when we have Venus in Aries, as I say, self-love is the perfect practice for this time, and just being extra aware that we need to be more patient with one another. On the 3rd of May, Jupiter is going to form a sextile with Pluto. So this is a very major, important connection. Whilst Jupiter has been going through Pisces, we have been going through a lot of soul searching. Jupiter is the search, Pisces is the soul. We're really trying to understand one another. There is this growth in a call for peace, for unity, for kindness, for compassion. And now all of that potential is connecting with Pluto, and Pluto is up there in Capricorn, deconstructing everything that we have built so far. And so they're linking arms and saying, we are now coming to a point where we can be much more empowered because we have a better understanding of one another and a better understanding of what we truly want. Clearly, we've been facing a lot of what we don't want in the world and in our collective experience. So now we can try to unite, try to make things better. That's what Jupiter wants to do. Jupiter is all about improving things. And also it speaks of having faith in one another, having faith that the changes that we are implementing can indeed make things better. But certainly we've got an idea here of increasing Jupiter, our power with Pluto, and using that in constructive, positive ways rather than destructive ways. Mars then moves into a sextile with Uranus, a smaller aspect, but it's a very vibrant one. Whenever I see Mars and Uranus connected together, it fills me with a sense of energy. It's quite thrilling, exciting, because Uranus is very focused on things that are new and different and diversification, modernization, and Mars is all about our will and our drive and our energy. So we're really kind of fighting for freedom. We are motivated to make changes. We're motivated to really break new ground when we have Mars sextile to Uranus. On the 5th of May, Jupiter will then move onto the very final degree of Pisces. I think this is important to note. Anybody that knows me know that I am massively into the anaretic degrees. There's a huge article on my website. I'll put the link in the box below, which I wrote originally for Dell Astrological Magazine. It was published in there and now it's on my website. So anaretic degrees have always really fascinated me. So anaretic, it just means this is the final degree of the sign, the 29th degree. And these degrees are quite volatile because they are at this in-between time. They are moving towards change. And it's almost like a swan song that we get an amplification, even more so with Jupiter, an amplification of the sign's qualities. We've got a tremendous surge of feelings here. Maybe it is feelings of joy with Jupiter, but we could also find that it feels all a bit too much. There's been too much uncertainty. There's been too much sorrow. And so once again, we find ourselves soul searching, trying to understand it all, trying to find the meaning in everything. Now, luckily, we do have Pluto there still in the background in a sextile to Jupiter, which is just going to anchor us a bit more. And we can lean into that, remind ourselves that during great periods of change, it is a normal response to feel disorientated, to feel like, I don't know what's going to come next. It's all about knowing that our power lies in how we respond to what is happening. And of course, Jupiter is advocating the response of having faith in ourselves, having faith in each other, and having faith in a higher power, if that is what you believe in, or at least the higher self. I think it's really interesting that Jupiter's movement onto this anaretic degree of Pisces is also going to be on the same day as the Sun moving into a conjunction with Uranus. Of course, this happens once a year. The Sun spotlights Uranus, and Uranus is currently moving through Taurus. Taurus is also a sign that we think of as things that are constant, things that are unchanging. But Uranus has come into this part of the zodiac and said, you know what, things aren't growing here. This is a very agricultural sign. Things aren't growing here. We need to diversify. We need to do things differently. So the Sun is spotlighting this and reminding us that we are going through this very unstable time. There's an instability to everything with Uranus going through Taurus. And as the Sun is a representation of the self, we could also say that this is telling us that we are going through a process almost like of freeing ourselves from ourselves. That's the idea that's coming into my mind. And Sun conjunct Uranus also tells us that we can and we are and we must change on an individual level as well. We need to create that space for personal change, our own personal liberation, our own personal revolution. This is an aspect that tells us it is revolutionary to be yourself, to allow yourself to be yourself. Mercury stations retrograde on the 10th of May in its own sign of Gemini. It's going to move back into Taurus towards the end of the retrograde period, and it will be retrograde until the 3rd of June. And there's going to be a shadow period again, the other side of the retrograde. So the full cycle will be completed by the 18th of June. So generally speaking, when a planet turns retrograde, it is withdrawing and asking us to go within to review. And Mercury is always about the mind and communication, ideas, how we think about things. So Mercury is saying, we need to think again about Gemini issues. And Gemini itself is also associated with connections and information. It's schooling, it's teaching, it's learning. What have we learned? Have we learned? I feel like it's almost saying, have we learned our lesson? Have we learned the lessons? Have we really incorporated these ideas? Have we got the right information? Do we need to find more information? Do we need to talk more? Or do we need to actually be silent and really think about the conversations that we've had? Maybe we're having to go back to a conversation that we thought was all said and done. When Mercury goes into Taurus, the rethink changes to ideas around our resources and how we survive, and very practical matters. Specifically thinking about maybe money issues. I know money has been quite a big issue because everything is going up across the planet. It seems, food is going up, gas is going up, utilities are going up, taxes are going up. Everything feels like it's demanding more from us. And actually Jupiter on that anaretic degree of Pisces can also feel a little bit like that as well. So Mercury going back into Taurus just means that we need to look at these things in a very practical mindset. That's the Taurus energy. And maybe to rethink what our resources actually are, because sometimes we don't acknowledge the resources we have, because resources is not just money, it's also about our skills and our talents and our experience. So Mercury retrograde in Taurus will help us to reconnect with those things as well. If you're interested in learning more about this upcoming retrograde and how it's going to affect you personally, I'm going to be posting on my Patreon a much more extensive exploration of this Mercury retrograde, and also I will be looking at Mercury retrograde through the houses for the signs, so you have a much clearer picture of how to work with this retrograde period. Jupiter is going to move into Aries on the 11th of May, where it will stay for around a year. There's going to be a little period of time between the end of October and the middle of December where Jupiter will revisit Pisces. But generally speaking, we have Jupiter in Aries for a year. So we've come from this very soul-searching, spiritual, passive, quiet sign of Pisces into this very forthright, fiery, feisty sign of Aries. Where Jupiter moves, it indicates where we have some kind of opportunity for growth. So positively, Jupiter going into Aries, it tells us that we're learning a lot about ourselves, because this is the sign of the self. So we can really grow. We've got great opportunities for personal growth during this period. We've also got an opportunity to be brave, to really go for it, to go for our goals, to be excited, to go on some thrilling adventures. Jupiter is the traveler of the planets. So we can have some wonderful adventures if we are brave, if we are motivated. In fact, motivation can certainly increase when Jupiter is in Aries. So this is wonderful for really getting our spark back. We can feel like luck is on our side on a personal level. We recognize that we are the ones that are going to kick open the doors of opportunity. We're not going to wait. We're going to go out there and get it. So there's some really positive energy that comes from Jupiter being in Aries. Now, of course, there is always a shadow side, and with Jupiter in Aries, some of the more problematic side of things is that we can be hugely impatient or impulsive. It can increase the levels of anger, because Aries is very much, a fighting sign, so we can really get angry here. And there is also a judgmental side to Jupiter. Jupiter in the natural chart rules the 9th house, which is connected to the law courts. So we can kind of go on a bit of a crusade. There's a lot of righteousness and outrage. So we could feel outraged by things that are happening, and that compels us to take action. But the action that we are taking, if we are doing it because we're angry, might not be the right action. So this is what we need to really consider around this time whilst Jupiter is in Aries. But certainly there are a lot of positives that can come from this particular transit. Again, I will be posting on my Patreon a much more extensive look at this transit, and also doing a piece on Jupiter in Aries for the signs through the houses, so that you can get a much clearer idea of how this transit is going to affect you and how best to work with this transit. Again, I'll put the links in the box below. On the heels of Jupiter's movement into Aries, we have a lot of nodal connections. We have the Sun's yearly conjunction to the North Node, which is illuminating our spiritual lessons, where we need to move towards. We have then Mars sextile the North Node, so that's on the 15th of May. 13th of May is Sun conjunct North Node. 15th of May, Mars sextile the North Node. So again, we've got this motivation, this desire to move forwards. And then on the 16th of May, we're going to have the full moon in Scorpio that also happens to be a total lunar eclipse, which is really going to amplify the lessons of this lunation. And what is most in the forefront are issues connected with Scorpio. So there may be secrets that are coming out around this time, because eclipses tend to reveal things. We are dealing with the issues of power and shared resources, what we share with one another, what we hide from one another, what is yours, what is mine. These are really potent issues that are pushing us to deal with our personal shadows, and also our collective shadow as well. But it starts with the personal. So we're looking at our fears. We're having to face our fears. That doesn't necessarily mean something bad is happening. It just means that we're being pressed to acknowledge where we are fearful, because that is absorbing, taking away our power. And we need to feel more powerful with the moon in Scorpio. We need to feel more powerful so that we can move in the right direction with the Sun conjunct the North Node. And with the moon conjunct the South Node, it is very much about letting go of these fears, letting go of all of the toxic stuff that has been holding us back. A full moon generally is a culmination. So often we can make important decisions around the time of eclipses, the lunar eclipses, because now we're much more aware of what's really going on. 2 days after the eclipse, on the 18th of May, Mars, the co-ruler of Scorpio, will form a conjunction with Neptune. So when we get these two planets together, we have some kind of story about the spiritual warrior. So spiritual Neptune, warrior Mars. There is an impulse to listen to our intuition and then to take action on that. It is about allowing our intuition to guide our actions. There's a real push towards selfless action, because Neptune is very kind and compassionate. So this is great for charitability and acts of kindness. It's a perfect time to do something along those lines. Mars conjunct Neptune can also be very good for creative projects as well, because the imagination is stimulated and excited by Mars, and we have an urge to take action on that and create something from that inspiration. The Sun then moves into Gemini on the 21st of May and then makes its conjunction to Mercury. So that marks the midpoint of the Mercury retrograde cycle. So we've really now got a spotlight on these issues that are connected with information, what we think, what we're talking about, who our connections are. We've even got discussions about neighbours and community with Gemini. And when we reach the midpoint of this Mercury retrograde, often it comes with a sense of knowing. That now we know what we're dealing with. Now we understand better. The mind is illuminated with the sun. Everything is revealed. Mercury is sitting on the throne of the sun, receiving wisdom from source. He is imbued with light. The mind is imbued with the light of God, goddess, deity. So we have a revelation of a kind here with the Sun conjunct Mercury. And we've got to remember that we are still in Mercury retrograde. So it's not about immediately taking action on it, even though Jupiter in Aries would kind of want us to. It's about just sitting with that, sitting with the information that is coming through, being willing to just absorb these lessons and then to figure out what might be the best decisions from this point going forwards. Mars then forms a sextile to Pluto on the 22nd of May. So that makes us brave, Mars, when it comes to implementing changes with Pluto. And it encourages us to take our power back if our power has been leaking, if we have realized that during the lunar eclipse in Scorpio. And then Mercury re-enters Taurus on the 23rd of May. So now, as I said earlier, we get a switch in focus on these Mercury retrograde issues. We're now starting to think over how we are dealing with our resources, what resources we have at our disposal. And it just slows down the mind. Sometimes with Mercury retrograde in Gemini, our mind can feel a little bit scattered. So this might help to just consolidate ideas a bit better and encourage us to give ourselves time to contemplate some of these themes. On the 25th of May, however, Mars is going to move into Aries. So this is a bit of an awkward mix. Mercury is retrograde, encouraging us to go over things, to go backwards, to review. And then we've got the slowness of Mercury being in Taurus. But Mars, of course, is the ruler of Aries. Mars is now out of all of this wishy-washy stuff in Pisces and now wants to start a new mission. Mars in Aries, I want to initiate. Now, of course, we've just had Jupiter going into Aries, so Mars is going to meet Jupiter very quickly on the 29th of May. This is an important date because Mars is going to activate Jupiter in Aries. We're going to get a blast of the lessons that Jupiter in Aries is going to be for us and also for us collectively. We are likely to see some kind of result from Mars conjunct Jupiter. Now, generally, we could say Mars conjunct Jupiter is like a massive amount of courage, a massive feeling of motivation, massive excitement, a huge adventure. Let's go, let's do this. But there's also the other side as well, that we have all of that impulsiveness that I talked about earlier, the judgmentalism, the crusading, the righteousness, the anger. This could be huge anger, something that's kind of blowing everything out of the water. So I think it's very important just to be conscious. This energy is in play. Count to 10 before you take action, whilst Mars is in Aries, and particularly whilst it is conjunct Jupiter. In the middle of that, as Mars goes into Aries, we've also got Venus entering Taurus. That's on the 28th of May, so one day before Mars joins Jupiter. So now that we've got Mercury there in Taurus, Venus, of course, is the ruler of Taurus, that at least might help us to be a bit more practical. You know, we've really got Venus in Taurus likes simplicity. Venus in Taurus values the simple things in life, you know, good food, good company, obviously some money. She just likes things to be easy in Taurus. So that might help just to tone down a little bit of this impetuousness from Mars and Jupiter. But I think we've got to be conscious about it. The final aspect of the month is the new moon in Gemini, which is going to take place on the 30th of May. Now, this is going to be an interesting one because we have a sense that any new start or new intention that we are creating around this time is going to be delayed. It's likely that things are going to be still in a slowdown because Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, is still retrograde and also in Taurus. Mercury will pass over this degree of the new moon on around the 23rd of June. So I imagine it will take until mid to end of June before the intentions that we have been setting for this lunation will manifest. So again, we're getting some kind of message about needing to be patient. The other interesting factor with this new moon is that it's not connected to any of the other planets. We've just got the Sun and Moon conjunction in Gemini. There is a square, though, to Juno over there in Pisces. So it feels like there's some kind of question about our spiritual commitment, the commitment that we made to ourselves, the commitment that we made to our souls. Are we living up to that commitment? Are we able to commit to our spiritual journey? Are we having a lot of questions, Gemini? A lot of questions about our spiritual commitment, our spiritual path. What's going on here? There feels like there's some kind of split between what we are feeling and what we are thinking. Hopefully Mercury retrograde will help us to analyze that, to figure that out and come to some conclusions that will help us to feel more committed on a spiritual level. But this certainly seems as though it's part of the story of this new moon in Gemini. This concludes my reading for May 2022. I hope you found it helpful. If you enjoy my work, then please do come and check out my Patreon. I've already mentioned I'm going to be posting about Mercury retrograde on there and Jupiter in Aries on there. And I also do global astro tarot readings for each lunation where I look at the charts in depth and I explore the asteroid connections as well. So if you want to check that out, I will leave the link below, and in the meantime I will wish you many blessings on your path.